Okay, I think I did.
Okay,
It says
thank you.
pause and stop now, so it must be recording.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, so I'm Marlena Gibson. I'm in the Policy and Planning section at the Delaware State Housing Authority, and we will cover the Delaware Housing Assistance Program today, which has a kind of 1.0 version and a 2.0 version. That's the way we've ended up kind of differentiating between the initial program that operated from March through about August and accepted applications in March and April, and the program as it was relaunched in August with some pretty significant changes to how it operates and the application process. All right. So DHAP we developed to offer rental assistance for households whose income had been affected by COVID-19. So we started that in late March, which was very, very early and kind of the height, I think, of panic and franticness. So we received a huge amount of applications. We ended up needing to pause accepting applications in late April. We received about 5,600 applications in those like 5 or 6 weeks that we were accepting them. The application structure, we think, contributed to that. We did it as a kind of basic pre-screening application that was very simple to complete and submit, and then collected documentation via follow-up. And on that follow-up, we found that overwhelmingly many folks were non-responsive. I think since a lot of them applied before they knew if they were going to get unemployment or not, the federal pandemic, additional pandemic unemployment kicked in around that same time. On follow-up, it turned out they didn't want to provide the documentation. So in the first round of the program, about 1,250 households have received assistance of a little over 2 million. To date, there are still a couple of stragglers, but we have pretty much closed out that initial version of the program and relaunched it on August 10th with some new funding commitments. I think the overall environment since March seems to be changing every few weeks, and there was a lot that we were trying to figure out, and I think the state as a whole figure out over the spring and summer about sort of how long is this situation going to last, what are the different federal funding sources that are coming in, and what different restrictions do they have, and how can we use them in different ways, what's the best thing to put from which bucket into which program to provide that assistance. And different funding sources also can have different program implications for how what the program requirements and documentation and things like that are. So what's new in the DHAP 2.0 is the maximum assistance first increased to $5,000. It originally was $1,500 and then up to $2,000 in the first program. It also, in the initial program, could assist with utilities. Utilities are no longer included. We decided to really focus in just on rental assistance, as that's the, you think that was the greatest need, and we know there are other resources out there that can assist with utilities, and kind of focus in on that specialty. One of the biggest changes is there is a new online application portal. And so Devin will go over kind of what the portal looks like and how to use it, and how it makes the application process different. But I think one thing we really learned from the first program was that we were doing a lot of very manual passing of documents back and forth. There were a lot of people involved, a lot of hands were had to touch things, not literally, but virtual hands, touch different documents as they passed back and forth. And we really were looking for something that would streamline all of that, put it in one place, save it there so you could go back to it and find it, and make that a lot more efficient. Another change was we made some edits to some of the documents. Lightened the income verification specifically. So there's just a self-certification form now for income that the household needs to fill out, and reduced the maximum income to 60% of area median income, which is a little lower than the first program, but also loosened up how kind of how intensive that documentation is, and also that only applies to the current post-COVID income. So, we're not checking what their income was before COVID and after COVID or at different points in time. It's just what the current income is. So a lot easier to manage that piece. Eligibility is also pretty straightforward. Just need to be a Delaware resident, have income below that maximum. And then really the most important thing is having employment or income that was affected by COVID-19. So that could be in several different ways. So that could be they lost employment, it could be furloughed. A lot of folks had reduction in hours, or maybe needed to reduce hours themselves due to childcare, schools being closed, medical leave in some cases for people who were sick or had family who were ill. I think one important thing to note here that income affected by the pandemic is not the same thing as affected by the pandemic. So we really need to see that the income is some impact on employment or income is a really important piece. And that's a really important piece for the federal funding source that we're using. It's one of the most important. So you might see kind of more of a focus on that than other areas. And the required documents are also pretty straightforward. I think it looks like a long list because there are a couple of different options on how to document that COVID-19 impact, but I think it is pretty straightforward, things that folks are used to providing if they applied in the first round. The first is the lease. It can be month to month. If it has expired and not been renewed, it needs to have a provision to convert to month to month. There is the income self-certification form, and so that's a form just that the tenant fills out themselves, puts in what their income is, and signs off. Documentation of the COVID-19 impact, which we'll talk a little bit more about that later. There are a couple different options there. Photo ID, W-9, and a release of information form, which is just a form where the tenant is kind of authorizing you to release that information to us as part of the application package. So documenting COVID-19 impact, there are a lot of different things here that will work. The easiest thing, I think, is communication from the employer. If folks have a kind of letter informing them they've been laid off or that they are on furlough. And if they don't have that, we also can accept an employer verification form. So that's one of the program forms that's on the website. And Devin will show that a little bit as well. That does need to be signed by the employer. I think as farther out we get from the time of these events, that can be more difficult. So that's one of the options. It also could be pre and post COVID pay stubs if they're documenting like reduction of hours. Documentation that they're receiving unemployment benefits. A lot of folks are submitting that, just evidence of the deposits or their statement from unemployment. And the last one for folks who are self-employed, like say they are driver for Uber or kind of run their own small business, there's a self-employment verification form for the tenant to just kind of explain what that is and how it works. And they do need to provide a little additional documentation kind of showing that income loss there. I think these are all things that as we're kind of getting fresh applications in this new round that we're looking at what are people having challenges with. So this is something, especially in the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about, what changes might we be able to make here? What could we make more clear? And we are particularly looking at the self-employment. That seems to be something a lot of folks are having some challenges with. And if we can replace that with more of like an affidavit that the tenant signs off on. So that's something we're working on now. A couple of common program questions that we get are you going to stop taking applications? And I don't anticipate that right now or anytime soon. There was a pretty significant funding commitment through the federal coronavirus relief fund. So I know that was difficult in the first round where we did receive so many applications, we did have to stop taking them because the dollar amount for the applications we got so far exceeded what we had in hand. But that's not the case now, so I don't anticipate that happening. What if the tenant is moving out or already moved out? That seems to be a common question. If the tenant has already moved out, we can't use DHAP. If they are moving out voluntarily, yes, it can still be applied for. And the last one, can you make repeat ongoing payments? we'll talk about kind of the program structure a little bit more too, but it really is not designed to make repeat ongoing payments. So it's much more geared towards folks who maybe have a few $1,000s in arrears, and we can pay their current due and up to 1 month in advance. So that's kind of the classic structure that I think is easiest to work. It's, it's not designed as, I know some other states have done programs where, you apply and then kind of check back in monthly to make sure that the tenant is still eligible and kind of are making monthly rent payments moving forward. This is not designed for that. So we're really trying to make sure that we can kind of get as big a payment out to folks at one time as we can, and make sure we can kind of cover as many months as we can when they first apply. Pre-COVID balances are another common question, especially in the last couple of weeks, I think, have been navigating this question. So one other really important aspect of the federal funding source we're using is that DHAP can only cover balances since March 1st, 2020. Anything before March 1st cannot do, that's a really strict piece of this funding source, and up to $5,000. So if there are balances over $5,000, our statements in the application that additional balances need to be waived or to be worked out with a tenant under an agreement that's arrived through the courts, through mediation or the pretrial hearings otherwise. So waived does not preclude some sort of workout with the tenant. It just needs to be kind of addressed at that time and not like an ongoing repayment plan. And so that is getting into the application portal piece. And let's see if I lost where the chat box is. See if we have questions in chat. No, not yet. And Devin, I'm not sure, can you pick up the screen sharing, or do you need me to like?
I think I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I will try to share my screen. All right, let's see what we got here. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And Candy, I can't tell if it's still recording. Can you see whether or not it's, now that I'm sharing my screen, I'm seeing a different view. So does it look like it's still recording?
Oh, sorry. Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Marlena. Thank you, Candy. I am actually going to switch gears really quickly and take you all over to our website. So here's deshhousing.com. And I'm going to take you over here to the DHAP webpage that is right from our home page. If you haven't seen it yet, I encourage you to check it out. It has a lot of the information that Marlena has been covering, as well as some helpful links and resources to get you started with the program and submitting applications. So it starts out with just some basic program overview and eligibility information, the income eligibility, and if you scroll down, you'll get to the critical section, which is how to apply. In particular, I would encourage you to check out the user manual and the how-to video. They provide some step-by-step guidance on how to actually log into the portal, create your login credentials, and start submitting applications. The video is about 13 minutes long, I believe, but it's well worth a watch because it really does kind of get you set up and walk you through it step by step. So I'd encourage you to start out with those two if you have not looked at them yet. And on this page, you can also find the link to the portal itself. I'll just click it real quick. We're not actually going to go through the portal step by step because we don't want to do any test or demo data in it since it is live. But I will show you some screenshots of the portal in a second to give you a better sense of what you should see when you log into the system and start submitting these applications. Also on our website, you can see the program forms. They're all available at this link. The program forms that Marlena covered. And I realize this probably looks a little bit overwhelming, but really just want to emphasize that the key documents that we are looking for in order to approve applications for DHAP assistance are pretty straightforward. It's the property W-9 form, the tenant release of information form, photo IDs for every adult member of the household, the tenant lease, the tenant income self-certification form.
Devin.
Uh-huh.
We're hearing some of the members cannot see the screen. I can see it, so I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just seeing the PowerPoint, not your, if you're on the website, we're not seeing that.
Okay. Okay.
It may be that when you share the screen, if you only shared Adobe, it'll only show Adobe.
Apologies. Yeah. Let me go back. All right. Can you see the website now? Okay. I need to go to meeting, not Zoom. Can you see the website now?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, perfect.
Yep.
All right, so we'll go back. Let's see. Let me just back up really quickly and kind of give you an overview. I apologize. So this is our website, the homepage, destatehousing.com. And right on the homepage, you can see a link to the DHAP webpage. So you go here. And this is what I was just covering, all of the program overview, eligibility information. Scroll down, and here's the how to apply section. So here is the DHAP user manual, the how-to video, the link to the DHAP portal. So you click that, and that's how you would log in or register as a new user if you have not done that already. And then the forms, all the program forms are available at this link right here. So my apologies. All right, so this is where we were. So it's really just, as I was saying, 6 documents that are required for a successful application submission, and that's the property W-9 form, the tenant release of information, photo IDs for every adult member of the household, a copy of the tenant lease, and as Marlena said, it has to be a current lease. It can be month to month, but it does have to be current and still in effect. The tenant income self-certification form, and the tenant COVID impact document. And as Marlena said, that could be something from the employer, like a termination letter, like a letter of furlough, a notice of daycare closure. It could also qualify, an unemployment benefit statement, which a lot of folks have been submitting. If the tenant does not have one of those documents or cannot provide one of those documents, they can use the employer verification form, which does have to be signed by the employer, or the tenant self-employment verification form. And with the self-employment verification form, as Marlena said, we do require an additional piece of documentation to support the actual change in income. We would not accept just a self-employment verification form that is completed and signed by the tenant. We need to have some kind of proof or verification that COVID has actually impacted the household's income or employment. Okay, so now I need to go back to the PowerPoint. So I need to go to, please bear with me, my apologies, share. All right, so now can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so here are some screenshots of what you will actually see when you go into the portal and start to submit your applications. These 3 questions require yes answers. So if the tenant does not have an active lease, if the tenant has not missed payments, rent payments due to COVID, or if the tenant lives in a unit that is subsidized, these will make your application ineligible, and we will kick it back so that you can review those questions and make sure that you are answering them correctly. So we do need yes answers to all of these questions in order to consider your application. So here is where you would enter basic information about your property, just where it's located, the ownership information, all the account information to make sure that we are sending payments to the correct place. And then this area is where you would enter information about the rent deficiencies to establish how much you will be requesting in DHAP assistance and for which tenants. Applications can be reopened at any point to either to add tenants to a property or to add months of rent that you will be requesting assistance for. So if you have submitted an application and it has recently been reopened, but the cure letter doesn't say why it's been reopened, it's probably because you do have the opportunity now to request assistance for October. And next week, because as Marlena said, you can request rental assistance or DHAP assistance up to 1 month in advance. So next week, you'll be able to ask for assistance for November as well. So if your application has been kicked back and otherwise it's complete, all the documents are there, it's probably to give you an opportunity to request that October rent. Right, scroll down. All right, this is where you would upload your tenant documents. Please do try to put them in the correct places. We have different fields for each of the required documents. It makes the review task a lot more efficient and streamlined for the reviewers who are trying to work through these as quickly as they can. Again, just wanted to emphasize, it's only a few documents that we really need. It's the tenant lease, the photo IDs, the COVID impact document, the release of information, and the income self-certification form. There's an additional spot down here for tenant income documentation. At the beginning of the program, we were asking for that for every applicant, but now we are just looking for that for the folks who report that they were self-employed. So we need an additional piece of income documentation to actually verify their change in income if they were self-employed. And this is the legal statement and electronic signature page, basically so you can certify that everything you have entered into the portal or put in your application is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. And you can either submit the application if it's finished, or you can save it and come back to it and work on it again later. So that's kind of what the portal looks like and the different screens that you would see as you're working your way through the application. Basic overview of the process. Again, you would go to the portal. I'm going to try to share this again. I'm tempting fate here. So again, you would go to the DHAP website on the destatehousing.com website, go into the portal and click New User Registration to create your login and register as a new user. All right. You would add your properties and add all of the tenants within those properties that are asking for DHAP assistance. You would upload their documents, click Submit. Your application will be assigned to a reviewer, and we are reviewing DHAP applications in the order in which they have been submitted. So if the reviewer notices that something kind of seems off about your application, or if something is missing, or if something is incomplete, the reviewer, the process in the portal is designed so that the reviewer can flag all of those errors, and then they would reopen your application. And you should receive a cure letter via email that states or identifies what is wrong. And you would be prompted to go back into the system, correct all those errors, and then resubmit your application. So some common issues that we have noticed with the DHAP portal and Midas. If you own or manage a larger property and you have multiple tenants who are all requesting DHAP assistance, please try to enter all the tenants under the same property. Please don't create one property entry for each tenant. We've seen a lot of separate applications kind of submitted for multiple tenants at the same property, which makes the task for the reviewer just take longer. So if the reviewer can look at one application and approve 10 tenants, obviously that would be preferable to having to review and approve 10 separate applications that could all be logged in under one property. Once the application has been submitted, you can't make any changes to it unless it is reopened by one of the reviewers or system administrators. It's a fairly simple process to reopen an application. Just send an email to dhap@destatehousing.com asking to reopen the application. It helps a lot if you can give the property name and the property number so that we can search for it really easily. That inbox, of course, has gotten flooded with a lot of inquiries and questions and requests for status updates. We do try our best to stay on top of it, but it's just not always possible for us to respond immediately. So it's obviously better for folks to just try to make sure that their applications are fully complete before they submit. But if you do need to add tenants or add months of rent, or if you need to make other changes, you realize that something was entered incorrectly or something was missing, please do just send an email to dhap@destatehousing.com, identify the property and the number, and someone can reopen it for you. Some common issues with DHAP documents. A lot, particularly in the beginning, you know, in mid-August when we first launched the portal, a lot of issues with missing documentation. So the most helpful thing is if you could refer to the checklist on our website. Let me try to do this again real quick. Share. Oh, I think I've been logged out, never mind. But there is a checklist right by the tenant documents on the DHAP page that has a checklist for all the documents that are required, those 6 critical documents. So please just refer to that checklist. Make sure that all the documents are there, that they're uploaded to the right spot on the upload page. We're still seeing a lot of incomplete forms or unsigned forms. So in particular, the tenant release of information form needs to identify the property up top. It needs to, the tenant needs to identify to whom they are consenting to release their information. So the property owner's name needs to be in that spot up top, and the tenant needs to sign and date the release of information form. Otherwise, we don't have authorization to even look at their information. So that does need to be completed. We need all 4 pages of the income self-certification form, and they need to be complete. And they need to include both prior and current household income. We're seeing a lot of tenants have left the current household income section blank. That could be perhaps because they don't have any income to report, but we still need actual numbers in that form to verify the change in their income. So that needs to be fully complete, all 4 pages, with all adult members of the household who have been identified on the lease. The employer verification form needs to be signed by the employer and not by the tenant. We've seen some tenants who try to sort of sign off for their employers, and that would not be acceptable in terms of documentation. And again, all adult members of the household, whoever's identified on the lease, we need photo IDs for all of them, and they need to be included on the income self-certification form because it is for the entire household. And again, for the self-employment verification form, we need that additional piece of documentation. We cannot just accept a self-employment verification form that has been completed by the tenant and signed by the tenant. We need, bank statements or some kind of documentation to actually verify the change in their income due to COVID. So other common documentation issues, the W-9 form, which we require for tax reporting purposes. The number on the W-9 form that you upload must match the W-9, or must match the tax ID that has been entered into the portal on the property information section. Likewise, if you are providing a voided check to ease the direct deposit process, the account numbers have to match. The account numbers on the checks have to match what is entered into the DHAP portal. A voided check is an optional piece of documentation, but if you are going to provide that, then the account numbers must match what you plug into the system. Let's see, and then the rent on the lease must match what you are requesting in the portal. So the monthly amount on the lease needs to be the amount that you enter in that you're requesting for assistance. And of course, some tenants pay part of their rent, or rather than paying nothing at all. So we're just looking at that monthly rent amount to make sure that it matches what is in the actual lease documents. Okay, I think that was it. Marlena, do you want to see if we have any questions in the chat box?
Do we ever? Which I've been trying to keep track of them and not miss any, and stick them in a Word doc. So going back up to the top, I think the first one was, what date constitutes eligibility to apply if they lost their job? Which I think March 10th, is that right, Devin?
When the state of emergency was declared, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, just checking. I know, because that's a little bit different. The rent is March 1st, so that one is March 10th. How are we getting verification of payment or if application was approved? So you will get an email notice of approval, and you will see the status change to approved in the portal. We are doing direct deposits. So once you see that approval, I would look for a direct deposit within probably the next week. We are doing them on Tuesdays and Fridays. Is that right, Devin?
Yep, Tuesdays and
Okay.
Fridays, yeah. Mhm.
Yep. I know there was well, actually, I don't know. I know one question we've gotten is if the direct deposit is required. It is not required, but it is strongly preferred. It's much easier to keep track of, not worrying about kind of where checks get mailed to and losing them along the way. So it's not required to enter to enter the application in the portal. We can issue checks. It just is very much preferred to do direct deposits. Next one is for tenants who cannot get a form signed by their old employer and do not have layoff notices. How should they document a layoff? Many have applied for unemployment but not gotten it yet.
We haven't really encountered that much in DHAP 2.0, but I know in DHAP 1.0, our community partners would either speak to the employer and kind of verify the information, or they were able to provide documentation that the business had closed. I don't know if that's something that we want to talk about offline, Marlena, to see if we would still accept those documents, because I think a lot of those businesses are starting to reopen. So initially, you know, in March, if someone worked at Dover Downs Casino, there was nobody there to help the tenant complete their employer verification form. But at this point, you know, the employers, even if the tenant's no longer employed there, the previous employer would still be available to provide that documentation.
Yeah, I think we'll probably flesh out the kind of acceptable documentation on COVID-19 impact that's on the FAQs on the website, and we'll make sure we add some more answers on that. All right, there were a lot about kind of the wait time, timeline, status checks. It has been longer to date, but reviews are definitely picking up speed. I think the new system we're using is very automated and fast to review, but I think whenever you're using a system like that, it requires a lot of setup to really get rolling, and I think we are really rolling now. And then there was another question later about kind of what dates were we working on. We are wrapping up ones that were submitted in August and getting into September now, and like I said, I think that speed is going to continue picking up a lot. There was also a question about routing numbers that start with a 0, but the portal will take the 0 off. I'm pretty sure that is a presumptive 0 and that is okay. I will double check with accounting though, and that's another one actually that we'll add to the FAQ because I have gotten that question a couple of times. But I will double check with our accounting section to be sure. Who can we contact to follow up with on the status that have been sitting for a while? You can email the DHAP email address. Like Devin said, that address is kind of flooded, so it can be difficult for us to reply to all of those, but we do try, and definitely the more kind of specific you can be in your email, that is really helpful if you know you've submitted them on X date and are concerned. I know there was a question later about someone who had submitted one on August 16th and hadn't heard anything back yet. That's one where, you know, please do email the account, and I'll be on the lookout for that one, and we can check into it to make sure, because I think that would have been past that one by now. So want to make sure we get to it. Is it a direct deposit or a check? If you enter the direct deposit info, it will be direct deposit. Like I said, that is strongly preferred if at all possible. Right. If someone quit their job because they were worried about getting sick, would they be eligible?
I'm not sure. That's an interesting question. I think if someone could document perhaps with a doctor's note that they were high risk, I think we considered some of those in DHAP 1.0. It's not something that has come up yet in DHAP 2.0, but we can revisit that and see what we would consider to be acceptable.
Yeah, that's another one where we'll try to flesh out those kind of eligible circumstances some more and what documentation would work would work in those. I think we covered a couple of those. Do you submit multiple applications for multiple tenants, or is it one app for the property? I think Devin covered that as she was talking, but ideally, yes, you would be putting one app in for the property, and you can attach multiple tenants to that, and you can go back and add more tenants to it. If you submit and kind of have another one pop up, just ask us to reopen, and you can add a tenant. Are there other agencies we or a tenant should contact about receiving rental assistance? I think we're trying to focus on DHAP for folks who are eligible for DHAP. There is other kind of slightly smaller scale rental assistance out there with the kind of usual agencies that some of you might be familiar with working with, like Catholic Charities, Lutheran Community Services. On our website with the COVID-19 resources, there's a list of some that in particular we support with funding to do this kind of work too. But really the scale of the funding is most significant for DHAP, and folks who are eligible for DHAP, we really want to try to help them there. I think generally the maximum amounts are a lot lower for those other programs. Is there a way to change something on an application after it has been submitted? Yes, there is. So it's just email that email address and we can reopen it. I particularly try to look out for those during the day because those are usually pretty quick that we can respond to. And it's even quicker if you can include the property number or your property manager number in the email. How much funding is still available for this program? We announced $40 million total between our mortgage assistance and the DHAP program. We'd estimate where we are right now for DHAP, probably still about $20 million. So that's why I said we are not going to be stopping taking applications soon. So please keep them coming. The next one was from Amy. It says, if the employer verification is not available, if the employer uses work number, what do you do in this instance? I'm not sure what work number is. I'm not totally sure I understand that question. I don't know if you can expand on it in the chat box, or if we can find you to unmute you, Amy. But I'll keep going if you want to add some more to that on the chat box. Can you send a deposit ticket with account number instead of a voided check? Yes, you can. Anything just documenting the account number. We ran out of we got to the end of the ones I had put in my Word document, so switching back to the chat box. If the rent on the lease does not include water billable to the tenant, and the landlord-tenant code considers water to be the rent, can we include this in the rent figure? I am not sure about that one. I might have to, I'll flag that one for a follow-up. How to handle a missing direct deposit on an approved application. Send us an email and we will check into it. Yeah, send us an email if there's one that's been approved for a long time, but I think payment should be going out today, so there will be a bunch today, I think, if you want to check later today or on Monday. Okay, here's another one. I put in the wrong information. Is there any way I can start over and use my Midas information? So that one kind of depends on how far you got. So for some property owners and managers that use other parts of Midas, working with other DSHA programs. So if you already have a Midas login and the property is already in Midas from one of those other programs, you can access it and start a new DHAP application for it, kind of without entering it fresh. It's not the end of the world if you did enter it fresh. That's happened a lot, and we are planning to go back and try to clean that up at some point in the future. So if you kind of got all the way through and uploaded everything already, that's fine, just leave it. If you didn't get that far and you do want to start over, you can just start over. If you just leave the application in like not submitted status, it'll just sit there and you could go back to your original Midas property. What do I submit as a lease if their original lease has expired and they do not sign the renewal? In that case, it auto-renews. If it auto-renews and there's a auto-renewal provision in the lease, that's okay. We have only had 2 residents request assistance, but we only provided them a W-9 and the landlord form. Is it required that we submit for the residents now? Yes, so that is the big difference between the 1.0 and the 2.0, is the application portal is structured so the landlord or property manager or owner can log in and enter all the information there. So ideally, if your tenants are interested in applying, we are encouraging everyone who reaches out to us to be proactive, go get the forms yourself, fill them out, give them to your property manager. And so really what all they're asking is for you to just log in and upload it. But yes, it is, the portal is structured for the property manager and landlord to submit the application. Can we use expired photo IDs? I don't think I've gotten that question before. I
think that's fine, right? And
yeah.
Yeah, and they also too, we've gotten a few folks who have Pennsylvania driver's licenses, but they're living at a unit in Delaware, and that's acceptable too. Out of state photo IDs is fine as long as the residence is in Delaware.
If an adult member of the household is not a leaseholder, do we need their income info? Everyone who's in the household should be included on the forms, but we're especially checking that the people who are listed on the lease are listed on the household. I know I've seen several where there's been like an addendum attached to the lease dropping someone if they're no longer in the household. If we fill out an application for a tenant, are we not able to file in court on this tenant? You can. I think the legal statements kick in upon accepting DHAP payment. So yeah, you are not able to file in court on the tenant while the application is in process. It wouldn't if it ends up that through a mediation agreement, there's an agreement that incorporates DHAP assistance, and if you receive the assistance, it's on kind of accepting the DHAP payment. Submitted 8 applications in August and haven't received responses yet. For you two, I would say please send an email to the DHAP account. I will be on the lookout for some emails incoming later today and make sure we can follow up on folks with specific questions. It seems the website will not let you continue creating your account unless the bank info and routing number are provided. That should not be the case. I will certainly double check. I know that's a change we made to the portal several weeks ago, so it should be allowing you to submit if those are not in there, but I will certainly double check if you've done that recently and had an issue with it. Oh, okay, Work Number is a third-party payroll company that companies use for verification. If you do not pay to be a part of this, you cannot get verified. Okay. I have not heard of that one, but I will certainly look into that one. If it's something like that, we might be able to incorporate. Direct deposit payments, especially from multiple applicants, will it be identified clearly to which applicant the money is applied to, or do we just receive the funds? Devin, do you know about this piece, that question?
I don't. I'll check with accounting. So if it's one property with multiple tenants, I mean, you will be notified which of the, so if some of the tenants are approved, but some of the other tenants need to be kicked back, you'll know which tenants are approved. So you might get a lump sum, you'll get a lump sum, you'll get the lump sum from accounting, and you know, it should equal the total of all those tenants added up, if that makes sense. Like once we approve an application, you'll be approved, you know, on a per tenant basis. And yeah, so but I don't know that the direct deposit information from our accounting section would actually specify this much for this tenant, this much for this tenant. It may just be a lump sum, but I'll check with accounting and provide more clear information about how they're, because I know in DHAP 1.0, that was a big challenge, was it didn't identify which tenants were actually the ones receiving assistance. And so at least with this new portal, you know how much you asked for, you know how much to apply to each tenant. I just don't know when accounting actually disperses the funds, if that information will be copied over so that you have it, you know, sort of in a statement in your hand. But I will.
Do tenants get documentation showing they have been approved? Right now, all of the communication through the portal goes back to the email address that is associated with the property manager account. I know we are asking for a tenant email in the portal. A lot of those are not completed, but please do fill them in. We are looking at making some edits to how the communication side works, to be able to send kind of more information to the tenants about the applications as well and status, because of course we're getting a lot of questions from tenants as well. Yeah, I think we just talked about that question about checks. Oh, and I see Cascades has some more questions. Did not get past the sign on, and it will not let you redo. Okay, you know, I would say for you too, if you can email the DHAP account, I can connect with you separately and we can figure out what the issue is. I know for some of the folks who are already using Midas, it can be complicated, but we will figure it out if you want to send me a follow-up. And can commercial tenants also qualify for this funding? So no, it is residential tenants for this particular program. Phew. And I did see one question that was about, can you repeat that? I'm not sure which part though, I'm sorry. This is okay. Okay, all right. So next there was a fresh one about an email saying you'd answered no to the following question, but no question was listed. So since it's a form letter, that paragraph stays there. If there's nothing listed below it, that's fine. Then there weren't any questions that you needed to fix. It may have been something else listed in the letter. So if there's no, each section will have like more detail under it if there's something kind of related to that you need to look at.
And again, if there's nothing noted in the form letter, it's probably so that you can go back in and ask for October rent.
Yes, there's a paragraph at the top that tries to cover that, but I know it is still confusing since those chunks of text stay there for all the form letters. Is it a requirement to withdraw court cases in order to receive a pre-approval? So we do have a conditional approval process. So if you are in court and go through a pretrial hearing and have a kind of follow-up from that to apply for DHAP, in that case it would be a conditional approval, and that would be pending getting documentation from you that the case has been dropped or an agreement has been reached. And so in that case, then once we get that, the conditional approval would change to a full approval and be paid on the next time we're doing direct deposits. So it's not a requirement to withdraw court cases in order to apply, but to receive the funding, yes. And does reopening the app to add new tenants make the wait time longer for the original tenant? No, so it goes by original submission date. So no, it does not. All right, so I kept a list, and I'm going to make sure I copy and save the chat box for some of those questions that were more complicated, and we promised some follow-up, and certainly we'll use these to help edit the FAQs that are on our website. I think for the relaunch, we tried to make them much more expansive than they had been than the first version of the program. But even still, I think there's lots of fresh questions that we're getting. And the more we can help address through that, the better. So we will definitely use this to flesh those out some more and make some edits to the FAQs, clarify some things that might not be clear, and figure out answers to some of the tougher ones that we couldn't answer on the spot.
Great. Thank you, Marlena. Thank you, Devin, for doing this. There was a question in regards to the PowerPoint. Can they get a copy of the PowerPoint?
Sure, we can share that with you. Is that the best way to do it?
Yeah, that'd be great. And then I can send it out to them.
Okay.
Perfect. I hope this answered everybody's questions.
We tried. And I would say, if you do have other questions, please do email the DHAP account. It is getting tons of email. We are doing our best to stay on top of it, but especially trying to make sure we stay on top of, questions from property owners and managers that are doing applications. So I know we've said that it's getting flooded a lot, and we can't promise immediate responses, but we do especially look out for the ones about reopening apps and kind of specific questions about about the application process or the portal. We try to make sure we get back to quickly.
Awesome. There's no more questions.
Yeah. Thank you all very much for all of your very good questions and for logging on and participating here. We appreciate it a lot and appreciate all of your work and the fact that so many of you are submitting these applications. We really want to get that assistance out there for everyone, for the tenants and for you. We know this is a huge economic hardship all around, so we want to try to get this out. I am not sure about accessing the recording. I think I will have to figure out where it was recorded, and I'll follow up with you, Candy, when I find where it is.
I probably created a Zoom profile, Zoom file, but we'll figure that out. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining and participating. And we will let you, if we need another webinar set up, we'll let you know.
Okay.
Sure. We'd be happy to do it.
I appreciate it.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.